Hey, it's Black Vader, aka I am Michael, with another reading from the code. I just want to say thanks to everyone who's reading this with me during Black History Month. It's an important month that, social media, commercial, whatever, everything's forgetting about it. And, we got to do our best to at least instill Black history within ourselves each and every day, whether it be this month, next month, or for the rest of eternity. We gotta be our Black history and recognize ourselves and where we're headed and what we have done and the things that we have learned. So I just want to say thanks to everybody. Please like, comment, subscribe. You can get the book at producejustice.com, written by the Honorable Neely Fullers. And let's go. Today we're in Area 9, War/Counter-War. We're going to talk about the maximum emergency condition, or the maximum emergency compensatory action. I usually put the videos up for kids, but for Area 9 there's no games. So here we go. It's serious up in here. There's only one race war. There's only one war in general, and that is the war on white supremacy and the war to dominate those who are victims of white supremacy. So here we go. We're on page 372. What is maximum emergency condition? In racial matters, a condition of maximum emergency exists whenever white supremacy, racism, is established, maintained, expanded, and or refined any place in the known universe by the direct or indirect use of violence or the threat of violence previously used. Under white supremacy, a condition of maximum emergency means that an individual victim of victim of white supremacy, non-white person, for reasons known to him or her, no longer has the will to submit to and or cooperate with any part of racist white supremacist domination at any time, for any reason, to any degree. Maximum emergency compensatory action. Maximum emergency compensatory action is a swift, efficient, unannounced execution, elimination of one or more racist/white supremacists by an individual victim of racism, non-white person, acting openly and alone at a time and place of his or her own choosing, and after commencing such action, immediately continues without respite or surrender until he or she is forced to eliminate himself or herself, rather than be eliminated or captured by others. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the willful and deliberate elimination of one or more racist white supremacists through death, and the willful and deliberate elimination of self through death by a victim of racism, acting alone according to a detailed plan and acting only after he or she has judged that he or she could no longer endure the effects of racism, and or that he or she is no longer able to effectively promote the production of justice, except by eliminating one or more racists and then eliminating himself or herself as a subject to the racist. Maximum emergency compensatory action is enacted only under prolonged conditions of extreme suffering and practically hopeless deprivation caused and or promoted by the white supremacist racist. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the promotion of the production of justice through counter-violence under racial conditions of maximum emergency. It is only willful, deliberate, and final. It is the only willful, deliberate, and final act of counter-violence that a victim of racism should commit against the white supremacist. It is not an excuse to engage in frivolous or cowardly killing. It is not an excuse for enacting violence for the sake of violence. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the promotion of the production of justice by an individual, non-white person under racial conditions of maximum emergency. It is the only correct form of maximum counter-violence / counter-war against people that is suitable for use by large numbers of weak and racially subjugated people against a universally powerful racist white supremacist over a great period of time. Maximum emergency compensatory action is a just and correct form of counter-war. It helps to promote thought, speech, and or action in opposition to war. Maximum emergency compensatory action is not for the purpose of traditional profit or for revenge. It is not for traditional purposes of direct or indirect personal protection. The non-white person enacting the execution of racists also executes himself or herself rather than continue to be subject to racism, white supremacy. Question: when is maximum emergency compensatory action necessary? Answer: a victim of racism may find it necessary to enact maximum emergency compensatory action only after he or she 1. has tried and failed to get the racist white supremacists to stop practicing injustice by repeatedly asking them for justice. 2. has tried and failed to remove himself or herself from the direct and or indirect power of and dependence on the racist in all areas of activity. 3. has spent a substantial portion of time and energy attempting to accomplish the aforementioned to the extent that he or she is reasonably certain that the racists do not intend to stop the practice of racism, white supremacy in time to keep the effects of such practices from becoming totally unbearable. Question: who decides when maximum emergency compensatory action is actually to be enacted? Answer: only the individual victim of racism, white supremacy can and should decide the exact condition in which he or she will enact the maximum emergency compensatory action. It can only be enacted through the will and only the will of the individual victim. Then the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action means the willful and deliberate elimination of the existence of one or more racist white supremacists. The willful and deliberate elimination of any existence, whether person, plant, or animal, is a serious act. No existence of any kind should be eliminated unnecessarily. It is never necessary to eliminate existence except when the law of compensation demands it. The law of compensation requires that when one person plans and willfully deliberately executes another, that person must also execute himself or herself. To eliminate the existence of some races, white supremacists, in order to stop them from practicing racism, white supremacy is oftentimes necessary. The very function of the system of white supremacy itself makes the elimination of white supremacists, people who practice racism, often necessary. Question: Is a victim of racism justified in acting as judge, jury, and executioner? Why? How does such action promote the production of justice? Answer: In a socio-material system dominated by white supremacy racism, there are no people in the known universe who are justified in acting as judge, jury, and executioner against the white supremacists, except the individual victims of white supremacy, non-white people. The white supremacists function as the most powerful people in the known universe. They do not judge against themselves. They judge in favor of themselves by judging in favor of the maintenance of white supremacy. The white supremacists do not accept the judgments of any person, thing, or force that opposes the existence of white supremacy in any manner that is effective. The victims of white supremacy, however, are not collectively a counter-racist/counter-force. If they were, they would not be victims of white supremacy. They would be a collective counter-force against white supremacy. Since white supremacy, racism is all-engrossing among the people of the known universe, and since it dominates all of the so-called groups of non-white people, then the only effective force by people against white supremacists must begin with and must be sustained by individual victims of white supremacy speaking and are acting as a united, independent fashion, like atoms, molecules, or a single sparks of fire. Under white supremacy, each victim is alone, and the very conduct of white supremacy prevents its victims from formally organizing as a group against it. This leaves only the individual victim of white supremacy as the only directly self-sustaining opponent of white supremacy. This is not only functional, but also just and correct. This way, no individual victim has to rely on other individual victims in order to oppose white supremacy. In effect, this is self-reliance in its basic form and is the basic essence of compensatory unity for a racially subjugated classification of people. It is not possible for one person to receive justice while another person does not. However, One person may feel the pain of injustice more than another because one individual victim of white supremacy, non-white person, feels a great degree of pain due to white supremacy does not mean that another individual victim feels the pain to the same degree. Likewise, no victim of white supremacy is capable of compensating for the pain felt by another victim, while the pain itself is directly or indirectly being inflicted by the white supremacist. The racist white supremacists cannot and do not compensate their victims for the crime of racism as long as racism is being practiced. The only way that a racist can begin to compensate the victims of racism is to eliminate the practice of racism, white supremacy. The racists have refused to do this. Therefore, there is no person who is qualified to be judge, the jury, and or the executioner of a racist except the individual person who is a victim of racism. This is because no one can judge accurately the degree of pain that the individual victim of racism is feeling as a result of racism at any time, in any place, in any area of activity. Oh my God. Questions. Hold on. What is meant by the term degree of pain? How much pain should a victim of racism feel and or tolerate? What is the correct measure of suffering for a victim of racism before he or she enacts maximum emergency compensatory action? Answer. The degree of pain felt by a victim of racism as a result of white supremacy is known to no other person than the person who feels it. It is therefore correct for a victim of racism to enact maximum emergency compensatory action only if that degree of pain is unbearable to that person for a prolonged period of time. Before it is correct for a victim of racism to enact maximum emergency compensatory action, he or she must do everything that he or she can to seek justice by repeatedly requesting it and constantly attempting to work and produce it by all other logical and correct means. He or she should attempt to do this until it is reasonably certain that the pain of injustice caused and or promoted by racism is not only too much to bear, but that the damage to his or her ability to function effectively to promote justice by other means is beyond repair. Question. Would a white person who is opposed to white supremacy be justified in enacting maximum emergency compensatory action? Answer. No. Any person who is not a victim of white supremacy racism is not justified in attempting to enact maximum emergency compensatory action. Under conditions dominated by racism, it is not possible for any white person to enact maximum emergency compensatory action. A non-white person who is not justified in enacting maximum emergency compensatory action unless he or she has, as an individual person, suffered the subjugation to the racist, white supremacist to the extent that he or she has judged such suffering to be prolonged and completely intolerable. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the promotion of compensation for the absence of justice. When maximum emergency compensatory action is enacted, it is to help make up for and or to help produce that which is missing. That which is missing is justice, balance between people. Because racism, white supremacy promotes injustice, one of the basic values that is missing in the known universe, that must be promoted by victims of racism is justice. Justice is the only value that compensates for injustice, non-justice. Maximum emergency compensatory action is a maximum emergency means of promoting compensation for the lack of justice. This means that it is enacted to help promote balance between people by causing the racist white supremacist to be level with his or her victim, non-white person, through the medium of non-existence for both. Question: would the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action by any victim of racism who chooses to employ it cause chaos? Answer: no. The victim of racism can, by employing maximum emergency compensatory action, cause chaos among any people, white or non-white. Let me read that one more time. I'll read it kind of faster. Question: would the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action by the victim of racism who chooses to employ it cause chaos? Answer: no. No victim of racism can, by employing maximum emergency compensatory action, cause chaos among any people, white or non-white. The people themselves, both white and non-white, racist and non-racist, decide what the relationship between people will be after an enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action. If there is chaos following the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action, it would be because the racist / white supremacist willed it so. The white supremacists are the only people who are powerful enough to cause or prevent chaos among the people of the known universe. The victims of white supremacy should not concern themselves with the possibility of chaos. They should concern themselves with the production of justice and the correct measure of values, and justice and chaos are one and the same. How does maximum emergency compensatory action differ from terrorism? Answer: terrorism is any unjust act that is basically intended to frighten people. Maximum emergency compensatory action is intended to stop one or more people from practicing racism, white supremacy, by terminating their existence. Maximum emergency compensatory action is not enacted for the purpose of causing people to be terrified. It is for the purpose of helping to produce justice. Maximum emergency compensatory action is not for the purpose of having a person to be remembered as a hero or heroine in the counterwar against racism, white supremacy. It is not for the purpose of showing off. It is not for the purpose of expressing hatred for the people who practice racism. It is not for the purpose of showing how skillful one can be in enacting counter racist, counter violence. The basic purpose of an act of maximum emergency compensatory action in all of its insanity is to help produce justice, balance between people, by having the results of a cruel, insane, and imbalanced system. White supremacy begin to compensate itself for its cruel and insane existence. Through the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action, all of the people directly involved die cruelly, insanely, and correctly as a result of the existence of the system of white supremacy racism. This too is all in accordance with the law of compensation, the law of laws. Question: is maximum emergency compensatory action an insane means of conducting counter-war against racist war makers? Answer: all killing of people by people is the result of insane teachings and conditions. But under current conditions, white supremacy, maximum emergency compensatory action is a forlorn and final way that an individual victim of racism can oppose war and some of the war makers when other ways have not proven effective at the time most needed. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the most honest method of using counter-violence to express very quickly and effectively the concept that the use of violence by one person against another for unjust reasons or objectives must result in waste for both rather than profit for either. Maximum emergency compensatory action is one of the most explicit, functional, and deadly statements against war and injustice. Question: is a person who advocates, supports, and/or commits an act of maximum emergency compensatory action insane? Is an act of maximum emergency compensatory action an insane act? Answer: yes, on both accounts. Question: why? Because all acts that are intended to do harm to people are insane acts. Particularly insane are acts that include the killing of people as a way of changing arrangements between people. There is never a sane so-called reason for one person killing another. There are only insane excuses. Since the people of the known universe must act and react within a system of white supremacy racism, all are insane. Therefore, some killing of people under some conditions can be regarded as a justifiable killing based on justifiable insanity. Maximum emergency compensatory action is a form of willful and deliberate counter-violence against the violence that is racism, white supremacy. It should be fully understood that maximum emergency compensatory action is only to be considered by those non-white people whose existence under racism, white supremacy has become for them as individuals totally unbearable, with no meaningful relief forthcoming within a reasonable period of time during their existence in the known universe. I'll read a little more and then I think I'll be done. No person should willfully seek, find, and deliberately end the existence of another person without ending his or her own existence. Eliminating one's own existence after willful and deliberately eliminating the existence of another person is correct. Such an act makes a person sincere in his or her belief in justice and in his or her regard for the value of existence and non-existence. This is in accordance with the law of compensation. The willful and deliberate ending of the existence of another in too many instances has been a game. Some methods for making war are oftentimes referred to as war games. Fighting and killing has, in many ways, been treated as sport and entertainment. I can agree with that. To seek, find, and willfully and deliberately put racist or suspected racists to death, and then to surrender to captivity by racist, suspected racists, or the victims of racism recruited for such purposes is not only unjust and incorrect, but defeats the purpose of taking counter-violence action against the racist. If a victim of racism does this, it indicates that he or she has chosen to take counter-violence act. If a victim of racism does this, it indicates that he or she has chosen to take counter-violent action against racists that was not absolutely necessary. It indicates that the person engaging in such act was making a temporary protest rather than engaging in an emergency act of maximum necessity. Such action is unjust. So I guess that's all I'm going to read today. We went kind of deep into it, at least a little bit over 30 minutes. Man, this counter war stuff is very informative, but I don't know what else to say. I'm just going to leave it to the code. Just please like, comment, subscribe. Please get the code at producejustice.com. Get the code at producejustice.com. And get the code at producejustice.com. We must stay on code. Whether we use one area, two areas, all areas, no areas. You know what I mean? But I just want to reiterate, like Neely was saying in here, is that, we must keep striving for justice by any means. And if it doesn't work out, then we got to do what we got to do. But, we should all try to strive for justice and balance between people before it has to come to this. And, only if it has to come to this as an individual. I'm just doing my part as an individual. But for all my other non-white counterparts, whether in this country or out this country, or this concept that we exist within countries or places or whatever, we just have to strive for justice and that love that God has put us here, the all power has put us here for. And whether it's 5 minutes a day, 1 minute, 1 second, one thought, that sparks within you the justice that we need, or the justice that you believe that you need. We should strive for that first before attempting this. But only and don't go too crazy either, So that was the code. I just want to say thanks to everyone who's with me and who's reading. And God bless you and your family. And God bless just all of us during this time. You know, I really believe justice will come one way, shape, or form. But it all starts with us. It all starts right here. So thank you all, and God bless everyone. It's Black Vader. Peace.